Hello everyone, my name is Dendabo Kabawario and I'm doing this quick video to share my views with you regarding the Black Lives Matters movement. It is a global movement that has, as we all know, that started following the brutal murder of George Floyd in the US. So what we've seen throughout the past few weeks is protests and rallies and peaceful demonstrations against racism and against slavery. So we've seen throughout the days and weeks, we've seen statues of people, prominent figures who were involved in slave trade being pulled down in the US, in different parts of Europe, and in the UK, where I live. We've seen statues of those, like I said, people who were involved in slave trade being pulled down in various cities, including Bristol, which is only a few miles from where I live. So my take on this is, I must say, I've been overwhelmed to see people being unified to stand against injustice, irrespective of race, irrespective of ethnic background, and irrespective of any political creed. That is admirable, amazing. So what I wanted to share with you is this. Well, we've pulled down the statues of those people who were involved in slave trade in Europe, in America, and in other parts of the world as well. Obviously, those those slaves who were victims of the practice were, many of them, the vast majority of them, were Africans. And they are Africans. I say they are Africans because I believe slave trade has continued in our generation as well, in different forms, of course, as we call it, modern day slavery. So pulling down the statues of those people who were involved in slave trade in 18th century, in 19th century, and before that is remarkable. It shows how fast we are moving forward in terms of democracy, in terms of human rights, and in terms of promoting human dignity. So what I wanted to say is, well, the statues of the man that got pulled down in Bristol and in other parts of the world represent those people who were involved in slave trade, just on one end of the chain. So that does not by itself necessarily guarantee the aspiration of the people who took it to the street. My point is, yes, it is amazing. It is fantastic to pull those statues down, and equally something must be done at countries of origin of those victims of slave. In other words, like I said, the vast majority of the victims of the slave trade were Africans. But on the other hand, it was not the white people whose statues have been pulled down that went to Africa in person, captured the slaves. They're not just slaves. These are people. These are human persons. They're not just figures and statistics. There's those people who were victimized and brutally treated, where fathers, sisters, brothers, cousins, aunties, and uncles, people who've got names. These are the people who were, captured at gunpoint by Black Africans themselves. So whenever we talk about this, we have to see things in the context. Why was it that Africa was the source of slaves? The answer is in order to explore the answers, one thing that comes out um, very big is the fact that Africa was actually colonized by the colonial establishment of the day and by the Africans themselves. So that's the point I'm trying to make. So whenever we talk about Africa, this is the great book I recommend all of you to read, The Scramble for Africa. It is by Thomas Peckham. So when we read this book, and of course there are other overwhelming evidence to suggest that the source of the slave were Africa, and that is facilitated by the fact that Africa was partitioned among these European powers in what they call the Scramble of Africa or the Berlin Conference. In that process, if an African empire had not participated in the partition of Africa, the Europeans couldn't have colonized Africa, and thousands and millions of people couldn't have been victimized. So when we focus on pulling down of the statues of those people who were involved in slavery, we should not just focus on America or in the US. We should also try to address the root cause of the problem. That is, we should address the root cause of the problem at its origin. We have to focus also in what was going on in Africa at that time and what is happening at the moment in Africa. Because, as I said, the slave trade is not just the event or the phenomenon of the past. It is existing, it is prevailing. We've seen it in 2018 in Libya, when the CNN and other international media outlets reported the market, the open market where people, human being was sold in auction for $100 per person. So we have to try to address the situation, the prevailing situation in Africa as well. That is one. Two, it is fantastic to start to pull down the statues of those people who were involved in the slave trade in Europe and America. And that should also happen in Africa as well. There are, in Ghana, we've witnessed the statue of Mahatma Gandhi, which was said to have been a racist person, was pulled down. Similar action should, I'm not entirely sure if Mahatma Gandhi was involved in slave trade. He was, he was a leader, a prominent leader who fought for the liberation of India. But on the other hand, he also had displayed some elements of racism that angered the African, as a result of which his statue was pulled down in Ghana. That's not my point. My point is, in the capital of Africa, in Finfinne, which the colonizers, the Abyssinians, call it Addis Ababa, there is a statue of Emperor Menilik, the very person who was heavily involved in slave trade. And the emperor, not just involved in slave trade, the emperor, one of the Abyssinians emperors who participated. This is quite interesting. He's an Abyssinian emperor, one of the Abyssinians emperor who participated in the Berlin Conference, in the partition of Africa, or in other words, in the scramble for Africa among the European colonial establishment, because Abyssinia was also expanding its colonial territory at that time. So one of the European scholars who was famously known for his scholarly work is Richard Pancras. In this book, you see it, Economic History of Ethiopia. Richard Pancras made research. He did a comprehensive study on how slavery were conducted in Africa, how people were captured, and focusing on Ethiopia or Emperor Menilik. He gives a figure. It's very interesting. He gives a figure on this book, page 75. And second paragraph reads, I'm reading from the book itself. It reads, Emperor Menilik and state that Menilik and Taitu owned 20,000 slaves at the palace in Addis Ababa. Addis Ababa, by the way, is the capital of Africa. The given name of Addis Ababa is Finfinne. That's another story, but what we have to bear in our mind is the fact that it is the capital of Africa today. So Emperor Menilik and Taitu, his wife, owned 20,000 slaves at the palace in Addis Ababa and a further 50,000 elsewhere. While Ras Wildegorgis had 20,000, Ras Tasamma 6,000, Ras Mikael 3,000. Ras Wale of Simen also had a large number, but Ras Habtegorgis was a poor man with only 500 slaves. When we say Ras, these are the guys that were subordinates of Menilik, Emperor Menilik. So what we see here, this is an evidence that Emperor Menilik at one particular point owned more than 100,000 slaves. These more than 100,000 slaves are not just figures in the raw of data. They are human beings. They are the Oromo, the Walaita, the people, that were captured at gunpoint. The gun that the emperor acquired as a result of collaborating with the European colonial establishment of the day. So this is my point. In the city of Finfinne, or as they call it, Addis Ababa, which is the capital of Africa, where the headquarters of African Union is located, we do see the statue of this man. It needs to be pulled down. If the global Black Lives Matter movement is to address the root cause of these problems, Africa should involve. It has to address the problems that prevail at the moment in Africa. Let me give you a contemporary problem in Africa. Last year, in 2019, I think it was in October or in September, I can't remember, the Nobel Peace Committee gave Abiy Ahmed, Colonel Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, who is the current Prime Minister of Ethiopia, the Nobel Peace Prize. It's shambolic, that's a matter for the Nobel Committee to answer. But what Abiy Ahmed's government are doing at the moment is a textbook genocide. Arbitrary arrest, arbitrary killing, gang rape, torture, eviction, deliberate starvation, what have you. These have been reported by human rights organizations for years and years. And just a few days ago, Amnesty International published damning report revealing that the soldiers of Abiy Ahmed are using, gang rape, torture, mass killing, mass arrest, things that amount to the textbook genocide. So how is this linked with slave trade? Is this because of the atrocities that the Abiy Ahmed government are perpetrating against Black Africans, against the Oromo, people are fleeing home. When people flee home, they end up in the hand of slave gangsters. They had to leave home because they have to save their lives, but what they find themselves in is slavery. Be in Sudan, could be in Libya, like I mentioned earlier, where people get kidnapped and sold like a commodity. I was interviewing a young man who shared with me he had been sold more than 5 times between Libya and Sudan on his journey to Europe. So that is where I believe the dictators, the brutal criminals such as Abiy Ahmed, are facilitating modern day slavery, and they should be held to account. What they deserve is not a Nobel Peace Prize. They deserve a fair trial for the crimes that they have committed. So in general, that's why I said the Black Lives Matter movement, the global movement, has to address the prevailing situation in Africa. The dictators such as Abiy Ahmed should face justice. The statues of people such as Menilik, who was involved massively in slave trade, in the words of Richard Pancras, and we've got mountains of evidence to show that Emperor Menilik was involved in slave trade. In fact, in the process of creating the current day Ethiopia with the collaboration of the European colonial establishment of the day, he committed genocide. There are 3 groups that were whipped out as a result of his imperial project. That is a matter for another discussion, but his statue should be pulled down, and African leaders should be ashamed of themselves to have their headquarters in a very city. In fact, it's very few kilometers from that statue of Menilik, where they have where they've got their headquarters. That statue should be removed. The movement, this global movement, should also focus on what is going on in Africa in order to bring about sustainable change. That's it for today. Thank you very much, and I'll get back to you with another video. Thank you.